Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This one's pretty fascinating. It's an academic paper that really got me thinking. Let's see. It's called Xochitl's Voice, Rethinking Power Dynamics in Teaching Autistic Teens.
Oh, yeah. I know that one.
Yeah, and it's about this high school student, Xochitl.
Sochi.
You say it's S-O-H-G?
S-O-H-G-O.
Gotcha. And what really hooked me was how she learned. She's got this unique style called Gestalt language processing.
GLP.
GOP, yeah, for short. And she's also super into music, like DJing and music production. You wouldn't think those two things would really go together.
Not in a typical high school setting, no.
No, not at all. But that's kind of what makes this deep dive so interesting. So let's start with Xochitl. Who is she? Well, she's a bright, articulate student with a really interesting background. Indigenous Mexican heritage, DACA protected.
Right.
And get this, she was first diagnosed as autistic in kindergarten,
Okay.
but then later reclassified as having a specific learning disability.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it makes you think about how labels can be kind of tricky sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. That reclassification really shows just how complex these diagnoses can be
Absolutely.
and how easy it is to miss someone's strengths if you're not careful.
Totally. And the paper talks about how Xochitl's personality and her social skills didn't really fit those typical images people have of autism.
Right. It's like we try to put people in these neat little boxes,
Yeah,
and when they don't fit, it's easy to miss the full picture.
exactly. So let's get back to Xochitl's learning style, this Gestalt language processing thing. What does it actually mean to learn in chunks instead of individual words?
Imagine trying to understand a song by only listening to one note at a time. You'd miss the whole point. You know, the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, the whole thing.
Right, it'd just be noise.
Exactly. It'd just be noise.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it's like for a GLP learner in a traditional classroom.
Wow, so they're taking in the whole picture instead of getting stuck on the individual pieces.
Yeah, they're looking for patterns and connections and meaning in the big picture,
Yeah.
which can be great for things like music. But in a classroom that's all about memorization or step-by-step instructions, it can be a real problem.
I can see that. I actually struggled with algebra in high school, always trying to figure out what the point of it all was. Maybe I needed a Dr. Horrocks in my life.
Well, maybe.
Speaking of which, she's a big part of this paper,
Yeah.
right? She's Xochitl's teacher and case manager, and she seems to have this incredible knack for meeting students where they are.
Yeah, she really does. And what's fascinating is that Dr. Horrocks is a GLP learner herself.
Oh, wow.
So she really gets what Sitchel's going through.
Okay, so how did she actually change the whole teacher-student dynamic? How did she make learning work for Xochitl? Because, let's be real, getting a teenager excited about algebra the second is no easy feat.
Well, she had this radical idea.
Okay. Listen.
Instead of trying to force Xochitl into the mold, she started by presuming competence.
Presuming competence. I like that already.
It means believing that the student is intelligent and capable, even if they learn or express themselves differently.
Sadly, that's not always the approach in education, is it?
Unfortunately not. But Dr. Horrocks flipped the script. She recognized that Xochitl was brilliant in music, and she used that as a starting point.
But how do you connect something as abstract as algebra to something as hands-on as music production?
That's the genius part. Dr. Horrocks showed Xochitl how math is woven into the fabric of the music she loved.
So it's not just some theory in a textbook, it's the language of sound itself.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how that could change a student's whole perspective.
Those sine waves that create sound, they're represented by mathematical functions. And those functions come straight from trigonometry, which is a core part of Algebra Second.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Or those audio effects that DJs use. Things like EQ filters, compression, they're all based on mathematical equations.
It's like those concepts are suddenly coming alive.
And it goes deeper. Beat matching tempo changes. They involve ratios and proportions. Even things like figuring out profit margins for a music career. That's all algebra.
So Dr. Horrocks found a way to connect Xochitl's passion to the curriculum. That's brilliant. It makes me wonder how Xochitl responded to all of this.
That's what we'll dig into next. Because this shift wasn't just about making the content accessible. It was about acknowledging Sechil's expertise, respecting her learning style, and creating a true collaboration.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's talk about how this all played out for Xochitl. So we left off with Dr. Horrocks finding all these inventive ways to make algebra relevant to Xochitl's world. Did that actually make a difference in the classroom?
It did. It really did. The paper doesn't talk about grades or anything like that, But it's clear that Suchel's attitude changed completely.
Yeah, I can imagine. When you see the purpose behind something, it makes a huge difference. It's like, oh, this isn't just some random rule. It's actually connected to something I care about.
Exactly. And remember, Suchel's a GLP learner, so she needs that big picture context. Dr. Hurwitz understood this and used a technique that's really insightful. She created these detailed scripts for Suchel.
Scripts, like for a movie. I don't quite get how that would work in a math class.
Not a movie script exactly. More like a structured outline that breaks down complex information into smaller chunks. Each script would start with a clear objective, like understanding how to graph a quadratic equation,
Okay.
and then it would lay out the steps involved.
Mm.
But here's the key. Each step would have concrete examples and analogies related to music production.
So instead of just seeing a formula, Sachel's seeing how that formula might be used to model a sound wave or something like that.
Exactly. And these scripts weren't just handed to her. They were used as a starting point for discussion, a way to help her understand and build her confidence.
So it provided structure, but still allowed for interaction and collaboration.
Exactly. And it's important to note that Dr. Horrocks didn't just make these scripts up. They were carefully researched and tailored specifically to Dachel's interests.
Wow, that level of personalization is incredible. It really shows the power of meeting students where they are.
It also shows the importance of teachers being learners themselves. Dr. Horrocks had to go outside her comfort zone, research a whole new field, and find ways to connect music and math.
It makes me wonder if this kind of approach could work for other subjects too.
I think it absolutely can. The basic principles are universal. Presuming competence, recognizing strengths, tailoring instruction, and creating a collaborative environment.
This deep dive is really making me rethink things. I'm realizing how much we focus on what students don't know instead of starting with what they do know.
That's a great point. It goes back to shifting power dynamics. Instead of the teacher being the only expert, we can create a more equal relationship where students are active participants.
It's like that saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn.
Exactly. And when we involve students in a way that's meaningful to them, the learning becomes so much more powerful.
We've talked a lot about the practical strategies Dr. Hurwitz used, but I'm curious about the deeper implications. What does it actually mean to presume competence, and why is it so important for students who learn differently?
Presuming competence is more than just a technique. It's a mindset. It's about believing in a student's potential even when it's not obvious.
It's about seeing the whole person.
Exactly. And it's crucial for students like Xochitl who are often underestimated. Imagine being told you can't learn certain things because of a diagnosis.
That would be so discouraging.
It can make students doubt themselves. But when we presume competence, we send a different message. We're saying, I believe in you. I see your strengths. I'm here to help you.
That kind of support can be so empowering.
And it can have a ripple effect. When students feel valued, they're more likely to take risks, ask questions, and engage with the world.
And see themselves as capable learners.
It's not just about academics. It's about fostering a love of learning.
I'm thinking about all the students who are struggling, who feel like they don't fit in. This deep dive is a reminder that we can change that.
We can choose to see the potential in every student and create environments where they can thrive.
Yeah.
We can challenge those limiting beliefs.
What I find so inspiring about Sochel's story is that it shows what's possible when we shift our focus from limitations to possibilities.
It's a call to action for all of us. To be more mindful, more inclusive, and more willing to embrace different ways of thinking and learning.
It's really amazing to think about how one teacher's willingness to try something new could have such a big impact on a student's life.
And it wasn't just about the strategies she used. Right? It was more about the whole philosophy behind it, presuming competence, recognizing that Socials had her own unique strengths and needs.
It shows just how important relationships are in education. When a student feels seen and valued by their teacher, it can make all the difference.
And this approach isn't just for students with learning differences. It's about creating a better learning environment for everyone.
Because let's face it, we've all felt lost or confused at some point in school. I know I have. I still remember how overwhelmed I felt in my high school chemistry class.
Sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you to explain things in a way that makes sense.
It makes you wonder how much potential is being wasted because students aren't getting the support they need.
Absolutely. And it's not just about academics. It's about nurturing those passions and interests that make each student special.
Like Sokit's love for music. Instead of seeing it as a distraction, Dr. Horrocks used it as a way to connect with her and make learning more meaningful.
It's about recognizing that diversity is something to be celebrated.
Because when we embrace different ways of thinking and learning, we all benefit.
We learn from each other and create a much richer learning experience.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from Sokil's story?
We tend to focus so much on what students don't know. What if we shifted our attention to what they do know and built from there?
That's a great way to think about it. It's like approaching learning as a journey of discovery, starting with what the student already knows and going from there.
It's about recognizing that every student has something to offer, even if it doesn't fit into the traditional way of thinking about learning.
I love that. It reminds us that learning isn't one size fits all. It's about finding those sparks of passion and helping them grow.
And creating spaces where students feel comfortable taking risks, asking questions, and exploring their own unique ways of learning.
Well said. I think Social's story really shows us how powerful education can be when we approach it with open minds and open hearts.
It's a reminder that we can all make a difference by believing in the potential of every student.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
And remember, whether you're an educator, a parent, or just someone who interacts with young people, you have the power to make a positive impact just by believing in them.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.